So the webinar tomorrow is going to be about how to maximize your benefits from Replicon's enhanced TimeOff platform. Now, in terms of who this will affect the most, this will be our HR managers, payroll, scheduling, and basically our administrators as well. And the reason is your typical scenario with TimeOff is, as you may know, an employee, Alice, wants to take vacation, so she reaches out to her HR manager. The HR manager looks into balances and policies, but realizes she needs to talk to the supervisor to see if Alice actually can take the time off based on their calendar. The supervisor has access to their calendar, but not access to the policies, so he goes back to the HR manager, and there's a lot of back and forth, and these are the parties that are typically involved in that process. And it takes a lot of time, and it can cause a lot of issues, as I'll go into. So this is fine if you're a small company, but as you get larger and your time-off policies get more complex, you run into some pretty big problems. And the reason is companies will typically have their time in multiple systems. So they end up having separate systems and processes for each local office. And in some cases, they calculate and track that time off manually via spreadsheets. Employees, usually contact supervisors and payroll managers for balance information, and then that data is transferred to payroll manually. So all of this causes a lot of inefficiencies and errors that lead to some pretty big economic hurdles. So one of them is the additional overhead. So there are a lot of issues with the manual back and forth process. The inefficiencies reduce productivity, and you end up with a lot of overhead costs. The cumbersome process also means that employees and supervisors may not take the time to properly track time off, leading to huge amounts of liability debt. The errors can also lead to issues with compliance, which then can lead to potential penalties. And then finally, the thing that not many businesses realize is that not having this visibility into your liability is actually one of the huge costs that companies face. It's one of the higher costs. And this is because that can lead to scheduling issues where workers will end up having to work overtime when they don't necessarily need to, or they'll be understaffed, affecting projects. So this is sort of that hidden cost that companies don't realize until after they fix their processes. So what we're trying to do here is essentially make the essentially handle any time-off policies or calculations regardless of complexity. And we do it in a couple of ways. So the first one is we have the ability to model policies to ensure compliance regardless of complexity by automatically calculating, time off based on hours, or having policies for each region and employee type, so you can automatically calculate accruals, carryover, resets, time off in lieu, expiry, et cetera. And then you can do all of this on a single platform. So now employees and supervisors can check their own balances and accrual calculations and use reports and dashboards to provide visibility to time taken and liability, and also see visibility and time off when scheduling or doing resource management. And finally, what we do is we handle the payouts automatically through the payroll workbench. Now, all of these bring some key benefits that companies really start to see with their ROI over time. So the first one is minimizing overhead. So all of this reduces the amount of manual time spent tracking and calculating time off. In fact, we've had reports from some of our customers, like Flight Center, where their reporting needs reduced by 50%, and they saved about 80 hours a month per accountant, which was pretty huge for them. People Stress is another example. They were able to cut admin overhead by 75% and increase reporting efficiency by 90%. So the increased visibility made it easier to check in on current and future liability, and this ensures that it doesn't pile up and you can keep your costs low. And that's actually one of the reasons that People Trust even signed up with us in the first place. The near elimination of errors due to manual input. This will ensure that all time off is accurate, reducing the compliancy risk significantly. And now finally, it's easier to apply these policies consistently, so this also helps with transparency and productivity in the organization. So if I wanted to book time off, I could look at my team's calendar and see that, okay, 2 other people have already booked time off and it's been approved, so maybe I'll adjust my vacation schedule a little bit. Or if my time off doesn't get approved, now I know why, because 2 other people are taking off around the same time. And the better scheduling and resource management definitely helps save on labor costs. Now, some common use cases involve complex policies. So if you have policies associated with expiry or accruals based on hours worked, time off in lieu, we can handle all of that. That's probably our most common use case. The other one is if you have a multi-location company with unique policies for each country or region or employee type, we can handle all of those things as well. And then finally, payroll processing is another big one, holidays, sick time, vacation, payouts, et cetera. We automate all of that and make it much easier. So JCI is an example of a customer who's using our time off, our new enhanced time off for these reasons. So they were a large enterprise, and they realized that they were starting to come under litigation risk because they had multiple locations and they had multiple systems in each location and a different process, and they were all manual in each of these locations. And it didn't help that they also had complex PTO policies as well. So they actually signed up with our system, and we were able to configure their policies based on each location and provide them the visibility into their balances through reporting and dashboards, and automate their payroll processing and any of the calculations or conditions that they had. So they actually ended up saving a lot with us and reducing their litigation risk significantly. Now, what does this mean for folks internally? These time off changes give us 2 big differentiators. So the first one is configurable policies. So this ability to model any time off policy around any specific need, whether it's vacation or paid sick leave, this is not something that a lot of companies do, a lot of our competitors do, but a lot of our customers need. So that'll be a great thing to talk about if we're pitching time off to a prospect or to a customer for upselling. The other one is handling advanced compliance needs. So paid sick leave across the organization, across various locations, is a huge piece that companies have difficulty monitoring and can't do very well with the systems that they have. So this is something that we can use to differentiate ourselves as well. In terms of additional product details, this will be available in Time Off Plus and Enterprise. It'll be available in the old Time Attend and Time Off products as well. As far as next steps go, we're looking to put in some additional validations around paid sick leave. This has been a popular request, as well as managing policies by groups. Right now, you can change policies of users individually, but we'd like to be able to do it for like a certain location or a certain group. And then finally, FMLA support is what we have on the roadmap currently for this product. So that's it in terms of, the overall higher view of the time off enhancements. I'll hand it off to Ashni now for a quick demo, and then after that I can take any questions you may have.
All right, so let's get into the system and have a quick look at the system's demo, or the demo for this. Let me just go ahead and log into the system. All right. So to start with, the first thing that we wanted to show you is that the policies that you can set up. You can set up policy at the global and at the employee level, which we will discuss in a bit. But first, have a look at all the policy setups that you have and quick things that you can do with regards to the policy. So in order to set up policies at the global level, you go over to the time of type section and you open the time of type that you want to set up the policy for. For example, I'm going to open vacation up here. Now, under vacation, apart from the other things that you can set up, for example, the balance summary display, when you're allowing the editing of submitted or deleting of the submitted bookings, you can also set up a policy right here, which is called the default accrual policy. The default accrual policy gets automatically assigned to every new user that you create and assign this time off type to. With regards to setting up the policy, we give you the liberty to go ahead and choose when does the policy come into effect. We have a choice of X years of service or months or days of service, and you can set up your policy effective date according to that. Additionally, you can start the policy by giving over some amount to the user, so you can have a set to balance set up, and you can provide that to the users when they start with their time of policy. The next is your accrual rule. So you have your accrual rules based on either a duration like biweekly, monthly, quarterly, and so on. Or we have two extra accrual rules. One, for example, is accrual based on hours worked. So here you can define, as there are some legal laws in some countries where you have X number of hours accrued based on the number of hours that you've worked. So in here you can define for every number of hours that you actually work, how many hours do you actually accrue. So you can have those mentioned right here. We also have an accrual rule that allows you to accrue and then expire the amount at a certain point of time. So that's done by yearly accrual with expiry. You can mention yearly how much are you planning to accrue, and based on what you've accrued at the end of the time period, what you set up here, how much should get expired. So you can go ahead and mention that up as part of your accrual policy. Moving on, you have some limitation rules. So you have the limitation rules available right here. You can limit the maximum balance if you would like to. Like you want people to accrue, but to accrue to a certain point, and then post that they should not accrue till they actually use the balance that they have accrued. Or you can have resets done in case your policy gets reset after a certain period of time. You can have some timely resets done, or you can have a yearly carryover with expiry. So you can carry over some amount from the previous year, and then you can mention that when does that amount expire. So you can set up an expiry and you can mention the accrual, the carryover accordingly. You have validation rule section. Validations can be set up at the system at the time of type level. So if you want a certain time of type, whoever this gets assigned to follow a certain validation rule, then you can set up the validations by going over to this section and clicking on Add Request Validation. If you want it to be user specific, like some users do have validation rules for this policy and some don't really follow it, you can set up the validation rules at the time of type level and choose which user gets to set up the validation and which doesn't. This was how you could set the policy up at the global level. Going back to administration, you have the policy set up to be done at the user level as well. So if I go over to the user profile, I will go ahead and click on the time off section where I can go ahead and allow the time of types that I want to for this user, and I can have the policy set up per user based on what this particular user has to do with it. The next thing that you have in here is the current balance. If you're an administrator and you keep setting up policies for users and you want to know what the current balance is so that the next policy can be set up accordingly, you have the current balance mentioned at the top right-hand corner right here. So you know what the current balance of the user is. Moreover, you also have an option to view the transaction, so you don't have to run the report every time. You can click on View Transaction and see from a particular date to the end of a date where what all accruals and resets have happened, and if there are any bookings that have been done, when was the bookings done, and what did it perform at. Now, as an administrator, you may not want to see all the users. You would only want to see the people that you administer or the location that you administer. Well, that's done by our functionality called groups. So if you've enabled groups from Replicon side, you can actually limit the administrator to have an access only to certain group of people. And with that, he can only set up the time off policies for those set of people. So in order to do that, you just have to go over to roles and permissions. For the administrator role, you can click on restrict access and you can restrict the access of the user based on whatever group that you've specified. In here, I have locations that I have set as groups. So I can specify that this administrator will only be able to manage the time off policies for certain locations that are available right here. Right. Apart from setting up at global or at the user level, the time offs can also be viewed while you're performing schedules. So if I go over to the schedule tab where you can go ahead and assign shifts to people, you will see that the dates when there is a holiday that the user has taken, or if it's a holiday that the organization has been observing, you will see the day grayed out. And if you hover your mouse over it, if it's a holiday, you will see the name of the holiday that's being maintained. So you know how and when to schedule people, and you can have your scheduling done in a much better way. Apart from that, if you are a project manager, then in that case, you can go over to project management. You can either go to the resources tab, or you can go over to the projects tab, and you can go ahead and click on the allocation section under the team section to see if there is a holiday falling up. For example, I had a holiday on September 4th. So I will see that holiday grayed out, and if the allocation is done for time off on that very day, I can see that detail here as well. This is from the project manager, schedule manager, administrator point of view. Now let's move on to the payroll manager point of view. As a payroll manager, it's very important that you know when does a user have a time off, or when is it that you have a holiday auto-populated. In that case, you would like the holiday or the time off to be excluded from the calculation. So in that scenario, you can just go ahead and go over to our payroll workbench setup, and you will see the time offs including in separate column. So while you're creating your pay runs, you can click on this gear icon, and you can exclude a time off from the pay run calculation, and you can have the payroll calculation done for the time off setup. Well, that's from the payroll managers or the managers and administrator point of view. You also have an end user point of view. For the end user point of view, let's go over to my Replicon. I'm going to my Replicon up here, and I'm going to click on the time off section. Now, there are two ways that you can have a quick look at the time off. So I'm going to click on book time off right here. And on to the right-hand side, I'll see a balance summary with regards to my time off. The other thing that you can have a quick look with regards to your balances is at the all balance section. So I'm going to click on the all balances. And here I can have a quick look at all the balances that I have currently for each time off type. To move on, if I want to know the policy that's been assigned, I can just click in here, and I can have a quick look at the policy that's been assigned to me. And I can have the complete balance history of the section or of that particular time off listed out here. So this internally, or this in a different way, helps you go ahead and reduce your overhead cost, because it's easier. It's given the end users have the access to have a quick look at their balance and their policies, and you don't really have to go ahead and manage their time off balances or let them know about those details. In addition to that, you also have a reporting section. So I can go over to reports right here. And in the reporting section, you do have the access to go ahead and report on your current balances, like what is your balance as on today, or as on a date that you have mentioned in the reporting section. So we have some pre-configured reports that you can make use of. For example, if I want to know what is my balance as of today for any particular time of type, then I can run this time of balance report. I can probably choose the name of the user that I'm planning to run for, and run the report to see each time of type that I've been assigned to and the current balance with regards to that time of type. So this makes it easier for me to go ahead and have a quick view of what the balance is with regards to my time of type. And if you want to know a complete detail of the transactions that you have with regards to the time off, then we have a time off transaction report that you can make use of. So you can have a transaction report or details listed out here. If I run a report, it'll give me a complete detail of as on today per user, what is the time of type, and if there were any transactions that were done for each of the time of types in the system. That will be listed out here in this section. Well, that's about how you go ahead and use the features of the new Replicon and enhanced version